Oh, yeah.
It is, because it's like, I just moved, they moved up here.
Fine, I'm gonna go.
So, I'm just thankful that she is here, that we can, well, originally it was from Vermont, and then they moved up, they lived in North Carolina for like 4 months, so they wanted to.
Cheers, when the meeting started.
I am trying to get faster than I've ever, because I said to Sandra, I'm like,
Moved up.
okay, so let's think about this. Michelle sent the agenda out for those meetings.
Yeah.
You can do this now, in the minutes, so we'll see how it
No,
goes.
that's so funny.
My grandkids
That's
are.
good too, it is, I thought I'd like
When I
that.
was gathering my thoughts, I was
You
typing it.
know,
I'm
my
like, I just
husband
went to
has a
look.
sister.
I know, so then I'm
It was so
like,
hard after, right?
yeah, so I put the, and if I didn't do that, it was like, I just think like right here, but like, I put in this whole list with all Ed and everybody, like, I'm putting them in now, because
Yeah.
otherwise I can just go back and delete them, but otherwise it's just like, holy cow, there's a lot. I know, I knew I was gonna laugh because I've already signed Kim hers too, so she won't see it, but I was like, oh,
Really? What did she do?
the meeting hasn't even started, how is it?
Yep. So it's, I don't know. I love having him here, and I'm so thankful that you're here right now and not having him. Hopefully. That's how I. That's how I. That's right. There's no blame, there's no reading. It's just me.
Because if I can't do it now, then I, like, I don't know.
That's my point.
That's how I was in the fall, gathering my thoughts, I was gonna type them up. That gives me my brain.
Just north of.
Well, and I had that idea, so I emailed Cassandra and I said, okay, this is, what do you think?
It's not funny, we
So,
both have the same brain.
I know, well, she listed them, so I just went in and changed it, but it's something like 2 minutes, a lot easier than. He did business, he wasn't.
No.
Yes, thank you. How'd you know?
Well, I don't.
I look lost?
Well, it appears that we have
No, thanks.
have a quorum and it is 6:30, so I would like to call to order the
See, we're doing something right.
10th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and actually if Megan could lead us in the pledge.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And actually, I'm sure that folks are aware that we have a former board member who did pass here just recently, and I wonder if we could take a moment in remembrance of him.
Betsy, we also lost a Levitt staff member this past week. Pat Clark died. And she was at Levitt for like 20 years. Just as an aside.
We should take 2 moments then. Well, thanks everyone. That was a rather somber beginning, but certainly we'll keep all of them in our thoughts. So our first order of business will be to act on the minutes of December 3rd. Any errors or omissions on those? See none. We accept those under general consent. That brings us to item 3, communications. Kim.
Thank you. I would like to report the resignation of Michael Cody, district-wide bus driver, effective December 10th. I would also like to report the retirement of Levitt Area High School custodian Dana Hood, which will be effective February 12th. Dana was hired on April 13th, 1983, and he has 37 completed years of service here in our district. Dana's done just a tremendous job, and we're thankful for that, and we're going to miss him.
Thank you. Tremendous service. Adjustments to the agenda.
Just one adjustment to remove item 9.8, which is the executive session for TTEA negotiations. We do not need that tonight.
Thank you. That brings us to committee reports. Finance, Gary. We'll even give you the mic.
We have met this evening. Discussed a few things. We talked about the reviewed October and November financials, and through November we're approximately 10% under budget due to all sorts of circumstances, one of which being the budget freeze we've had in place for a good portion of this year, and also the good use of some of these CRF funds to help offset some of our costs of our employees. So that was good to hear. We also we had talked in one of our previous meetings about some of the unemployment costs that we incurred during last spring. Currently, we will be responsible for about $27,000. However, there are still credits coming in towards that, and we're working through how to apply those credits for fiscal year that's already gone by. We discussed the wastewater treatment plant. We were approved for the Clean Water SRF grant. Currently, admin team is working with the bond banks and Wright Pierce to get a final proposal and timelines so that we can schedule for closing to start that project. The Siemens project was the next thing we discussed, Siemens Phase 2, and Michelle reported out that project is approximately 3/4 complete, which is good, and things are moving along nicely. And the final thing we talked about was kind of a recap on some of these CRF funds that we've had for this year. In all, the district's received about $4.4 million of CRF funds, so I applaud our admin team for really making good use of those funds and really pushing our district forward through this pandemic and being able to keep us going in the right direction.
Thank you. And I would echo Yuri's comment. That's a whole lot of work that went on and continues to go on alongside our I don't want to say normal operations because nothing's normal, but semi-normal operations. So thanks everybody for making that process work. PTB, we have not met. Brings us to curriculum policy. Joanne.
We have not met either.
Curriculum policy has not met. You almost think we'd have holidays or something.
We're going to soon.
We did meet actually, because we met in December, but then we had the storm and we didn't have our meeting in December, our board meeting.
Oh.
I was thinking the same thing, Joanne, and I checked the calendar. So we did meet in.
I guess we met. I hope you don't think I can remember what
We were all there. Our attendance has been great this year.
Teresa, do you have any highlights you'd like to share from
Yes, we discussed several policies. Some of them are going to be on the agenda this evening. We're always trying to streamline our work, and so one of the policies is a deletion. Parent involvement in education. We had quite a discussion about that. It's not required. And we are asking for a first and second reading and adoption of policy KI, visitors to schools. So those were our highlights from, it was early December, I feel like, when we met.
it was a
A
while
long time ago.
Thank you. And I believe Olivia is not here this evening, so we will look forward to seeing her next time. 5.5, non-teaching negotiations, AFSCME and ESP. Michelle, is there, or another committee member, there's nothing to report at this point? Thank you. Administrator report, building principals. Go. Ryan's ready to go. Thank you.
Good evening and Happy New Year. I'm excited and pleased to report on behalf of the elementary principals tonight. Throughout the course of the school year, we've talked a lot about some of the projects that have been happening outside of our school, such as playgrounds, paving, and getting new signs for our building. But we thought tonight we would talk a little bit about some of the things that we have going on inside the school that we were able to use the COVID relief funds for. So two that are really exciting is the first one, we were able to purchase classroom libraries for our classrooms so that our students and our teachers can have a wide range of different topics and interests that are aligned to the developmental and reading levels of our students. So every single teacher, including our remote teachers and our special educators at the elementary level, were able to get a large order of books to support their classrooms and to support our students and their families. The second one I wanted to talk about is, over the course of the last couple of years, we've been participating in a TV project where the hope is for every classroom to have a TV so that the teachers can project work for the students. And luckily, we were able to get Apple TVs so that the students who have iPads now will be able to project their work onto the TVs and talk about their learning from their desk. And it'll be projected on the screen for all the kids to see. So we're really excited that all of our classrooms now are being outfitted with TVs and Apple TVs, most of them. So those are two really exciting projects we were able to use the COVID relief funds for that are happening inside of our schools. Thank you very much.
Good evening and Happy New Year. So, do you want to build a snowman? Because kids at Trip do, and we are building snowman. I saw one student Tuesday, pick out a cold lunch that would have carrots and tomatoes in it for the snowman. Not so concerned about the sandwich that went with it, but the snowman looks good. So they're excited to be back and using their break time to do something really fun. We're preparing for our second trimester progress reports, which will be coming out in a couple weeks. January 22nd is the date for closing grades. And our teachers, our ELA special ed teachers, and our Learning Lab and Lit Lab also got classroom library books to help build their classroom libraries, and everyone is really excited to have those. It was a great opportunity for our Learning Lab, which is a new classroom that we have in our building, and they actually got a nice collection of 7th grade books so that students, when they're in there, if they have some downtime, they can pick out a book to read. So that was really great. Tonight you're going to see a basketball coach on the agenda. So we've got our coaches, we've got our kids signed up, and we're just waiting for the green light from the DOE for us to start playing. We may extend our season into February to hopefully get that moment to get them all together. But we're really trying to be hopeful. Thank you.
That's hard to follow because I don't know anything about snowmen. But I'm going to continue with the theme of some of the items we were able to get with the COVID funds this fall for in the building. And again, we got a number of classroom library books as well, in addition to some library materials for the library itself to get outreach for the students. Let's see, what else we got on here. We have also got some equipment for Buzz Media Crew, so they're able to do expand their reach and what they can do with their video production class, and Randy's been helping them out with that. And we're going to use that, a lot of that equipment, to prepare for the 8th grade parent night, which normally is the first week in February. That will not be happening, usually happens right here. So we will do that virtually with some production work that's being done with the kids, and they started that before we went on vacation, and they've done some interviews around, and they're creating videos. So I think that's going to be really great, even though it's not face-to-face, so I think it'll be good, very good and informative. And as far as calendar-wise goes, we're getting ready to flip into the second semester here in a couple of weeks, which will be a full-on change of schedule for students. So they had their first semester classes every day that they were here through the first semester, and they'll switch to a second round of what would have been their white day classes for second semester. So that'll be a complete change of schedule for kids, which we're a little anxious about because we've never really done that in the middle of the year before. So we'll see how that plays out, but I think it's going to go pretty well. And it may sound a little early, but we actually started in our faculty meeting yesterday talking about what next school year might look like. And even though this has been a difficult road to go down, there may actually be some things we want to kind of hang on to. So what might those be, and how might we use those as we move forward? And that's the conversation started yesterday. So we are progressing forward, even though it's awkward at best sometimes, but I think we're still making the best that we can out of the situation we're in.
Thank you all for sharing some of the building. I think that we're able to leverage those magical funds to do. Kim, you're next.
Thank you, Becky. Okay, so as you may recall that we did not do the normal spring testing for students last spring due to the pandemic.
Can't hear you.
How about now?
Pretty close.
Okay. So last year, we did not do the typical MEA testing that we always do because of the pandemic. For many months now, the DOE has been in negotiations with a new vendor to identify a new test that will be used for the mandated spring testing. So they have had a stakeholder group that include representatives from the Maine Education Association, from the Maine Principals Association, School Superintendent Association, Maine School Boards Association, I'm sure I'm missing someone here, from MADSEC, which is Special Education Association, and from the Maine Curriculum Leaders Association as well. Guidance recently came out about what to do for our evaluation system for this year. And basically what it said is that we recognize we're still in the pandemic. We recognize that there's constant change, that we're teaching in ways that we've never taught before, and that goes sometimes from in-person to remote. So they want district steering committees to get together. They want them to focus on support and feedback for teachers and decide which components of the teacher evaluation system we need to implement for this year. So they're giving each district flexibility, recognizing that there are a lot of challenges. So Teresa has called a meeting of the steering committee for our district. And Teresa, when are you meeting? Is it this month?
January 13th.
January 13th. So we'll be bringing more information as that committee does its work. The spring testing window, whatever that spring test is going to, I jumped around, didn't I? Okay, let me go back to spring testing for a second. Spring testing window will be March 1st through June 15th this year. And the test that will be chosen will be one that we will have for the next 5 years, which is a really positive thing because we'll have some longevity with our data. Every time the state changes a test, we lose the ability to compare year after year. So having the same test for 5 years is great. The DOE is also focused on having a test that will get the results of that testing into students and teachers' hands very, very quickly so that it can be used for students to look and see their own growth in areas where they want to improve, as well as to set goals around that, and for teachers to use those test results and that data to inform instruction right off the bat the same year. So we're very hopeful about what that would look like. Once they have settled those negotiations, that information will become public for all of us. Back to the teacher evaluation system. Thank you, Teresa, for calling the steering committee together. More information. Okay.
I know I had a little, like, never mind.
Well, clearly I did too. Okay, so I met with our nurses on Monday of this week, and you probably are aware of the communication that I sent out as a result of that meeting. We learned of several positive cases that happened during the break. Because they happened during the break, people were not at school, so there was much less impact in school than there might have been otherwise, because people were already out and already quarantining. However, we are monitoring very, very closely, and I want to give you an update of where we are as of today in terms of numbers of people quarantining and positive cases. So at the high school, we have 11 students in quarantine and 4 positive cases. At TMS, we have 9 students in quarantine with 3 positive cases. At TES, I was going to tell you that we have 9 students in quarantine and 2 positive cases. However, at around 4 o'clock this afternoon, Principal Marston called me. She had been apprised of a situation that she and Nurse Casey are currently doing the contact tracing, the close contact tracing. It appears at this time that there will be quite a large impact from this case today. We'll know more. She's going to text me once they know exactly what that's going to mean, but I do think it's going to impact a number of students and quite a few staff. So more to follow on that. TPS has 12 students in quarantine with 2 positive cases. Green Central School has 2 students and 3 staff in quarantine with 1 positive case, and Leeds has 6 students and 1 staff in quarantine, currently no positive cases. Yeah, yay. So we have a total of 53 people in quarantine, not counting the information that we received this afternoon, and 12 cases. I do want to take a moment just to say thank you to our nurses. We have Maria Jaffoon at TPS, we have Casey Smith at TES, Michelle Lenfest at the middle school, we have Krista Murray at the high school, Paula Aldridge at Green Central School, and Christina Cloutier at Leeds. And our nurses have been doing a phenomenal job. They meet on a regular basis. I meet with them. They are on top of every case that occurs. They are following up with families, having the hard conversations. The state and CDC are requiring additional paperwork now for each case. They have not complained about that at all. They've just jumped in and they're getting that paperwork done. And then even this morning, I got a message from Krista, actually, who happened to be out, but she was actually creating a spreadsheet to help make it easier for me, because every single board meeting night, I'm contacting all the principals and sometimes the nurses to say, what are the numbers that you have right now? So she's created a spreadsheet to keep that orderly so it's easy for all of us to access. But they are doing a phenomenal job. Their energy stays up, and the conversations they're having, they're not always short. You know, when you're calling someone to say your child is a close contact or you're a close contact, some of those conversations are okay. Others are like, what do I do next? I'm worried about this. And so they're taking the time. So I have a huge amount of appreciation for their work and their communication. Danielle, we had our last board meeting was canceled, so I didn't get to say this officially. So Danielle is no longer principal, just Principal Harris. She is Dr. Harris at this point. She has her doctorate. Congratulations. Now, what was interesting about that was she had found out about a case, and she's talking to me, and I'm saying, okay, remember, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and she's telling me how she and Christina are going to work together, and then she said, but Kim, I have to take a break at 1, I have to. And I'm thinking to myself, really? And she says, well, I've got to defend my dissertation. Okay, well, and now you've got it. So congratulations. The administrative team, I really appreciate Yuri and Betsy both acknowledging the administrative team, because this team has come together to achieve what I really thought was going to be impossible. As Yuri said, we have received in federal funding a total of a little over $4.4 million in a very, very short period of time. And everyone has just stepped up and just worked incredibly hard to make sure that we are identifying, purchasing, and doing projects that are going to benefit the district and our students, not just now, but for years in the future as well. And then there's all the follow-through in the business office with all the invoicing as well. Michelle, I know you and Sally have worked nights and weekends for a while now. So the team has really stepped up to make good use of this federal funding, and I appreciate it very much. Okay, let's see. All right, so you may have read about the Education Stabilization Funds. It looks like there will be another $82 billion in additional funds for education. This is across the country. $54.3 billion of that for elementary and secondary emergency relief for public K through 12 schools. And that money will need to be obligated by the end of September of 2022. We'll get more information on that as well, timelines and what that would look like. I know Michelle has this really mixed feeling of yay and oh no every time we talk about additional funding. We will continue with our sub-custodians. If you remember, the funding for the sub-custodians did end at the end of December. However, we still are in the middle of the pandemic. We still need that additional cleaning. We may have an extension on that funding. Michelle, is that what you want to add?
5:30 p.m. we got an extension to June 30.
I'm sorry, extension to?
June 30.
June 30.
21.
So great news. All right, so we're going to keep our sub-custodians, and we're going to be able to use the money for it. Thank you, Michelle. So I gave to you, along with your packet tonight, a sheet that looks like this. It's sub-pay. Does everybody have it?
Yeah.
All right, I just want to bring it to your attention. Minimum wage increased on January 1st by 15 cents. That did impact sub-pay only, no other pay or no other employees. So Michelle went ahead and calculated that additional minimum wage into the sub-pay rates, and there they are for you at this point. We will be looking at that a little further, Michelle and I will, because when there are increases to minimum wage, there is less of a differentiation between degreed and certified subs than those who are not certified or do not have degrees. So we just need some time to take a look at that and see if we have a proposal around that for the board. Also, in your packet, I left with you a sheet that looks like this. And what that is a little bit of history about the budget validation referendum, voter participation, and cost to the district for holding that election. So we had talked about this briefly at the earlier board meeting in December. I had shared with you that, that one of our towns would prefer that we hold the BVR when the state election happens, which should be June 8th this coming year. The other two towns would prefer that we hold it in May like we usually do. So the board had asked me to get information on the numbers of voters over the past few years, as well as the cost to the district for the elections.
And we have that on as an board.
Let me just double check. Which one? 9.6. 9.6, yes, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Another thing that I want to talk to the board about is the new law that went into effect on January 1st, 2021, and it's the earned paid leave law that went into effect. It went into effect for anyone who is not part of a collective bargaining agreement. So for our district, that would mean our administrators, it would mean the people who are part of the NICE work agreement, and it would mean any non-contracted employees. And what earned paid leave means is that employees accrue 1 hour of leave time for every 40 hours that they work. And there are some points. I'm going to give you a highlight of what that law says. But before I do that, I just wanted to make it really clear that anyone who is part of a collective bargaining agreement that is in full force right now, the law does not go into effect for them. It does go into effect for them when the current collective bargaining agreement expires. So for example, we have ESP and AFSCME contracts that will expire June 30th of this year. At that time, the earned paid leave law goes into effect for those groups. Teachers, we just settled teachers, so we've got 2.5 more years with them, but when that contract expires, earned paid leave law goes into effect for our teachers as well. So highlights of earned paid leave law. I told you that employees accrue 1 hour of leave for every 40 hours worked. The earned paid leave time may be used for any purpose, including an emergency situation, your pipes burst in your basement, your car won't start, or if you have an emergency illness, you could use it for that. You could also use it for vacation-like activities. I mean, a reunion, recreational activity, or just vacation. Employees will provide at least 4 weeks advance notice for plan purposes. So there'll be no parameters around how they use the time, but we can ask that they give us advance notice of that so that we make sure that we can get coverage. And the restrictions that we would have would be about certain days. For example, I'm going to recommend that we don't have this time used immediately before after a vacation period, for example, or immediately before after a holiday, like long weekend type of thing as well, because it's very difficult to get coverage for many people doing that. So let me see. Unused earned paid leave can be carried over, but employees cannot have any more than 40 total hours of earned paid leave in 1 year. And This will be a little bit of a change for this, a challenge for us, because in one way, it's going to be hard for business office to track this leave. The leave will run concurrently with leaves that are already in the current work agreements and/or contracts, but we'll have to track it. So we're trying to figure out that part now. And I will be, MSMA has a sample policy. I've been kind of waiting to see if they were going to come out with one, and they have. And so I will be working with Teresa to take that to curriculum and policy, and then that will be coming to the board as well. So how will this impact the district? Well, it means that people will have leave that there are no parameters around. They can use it when they need to use it once they have earned it. Right? That's basically what will happen. So an example, not right now because AFSCME is in a contract cycle right now, but for example, our bus drivers currently get paid for vacation time, but they generally don't take vacation time because we need our bus drivers driving students. Bus drivers would be able to use this earned paid leave on school days. So that would be an example of an impact that we will see going forward. Do you want to keep going, Betsy? Do you want to ask if there are any questions?
Any questions?
Okay. There'll be more once the curriculum and policy committee does their work. All right, so moving forward then, Chair Bullard, Principal Shaw, and I met with Student Board Representative Olivia Morel right before the break, and we wanted to ask her how her experience as the board student rep has been so far, if she had any questions or had ideas or observations that would be good for us to know. It was a good conversation, and what we found out is that Olivia is interested in having all of the policy information going forward, which is fantastic. And Eben, would you add anything to that?
No, I think she was very upbeat about her experience so far, and I think she's looking forward to participating as we get into budget season.
Yes. Yeah, I think she definitely will. It'll be interesting for her. Okay, another thing is that there has been emergency leave that was to expire at the end of December this past year. That emergency leave is an option to extend that through March of this year. And so my plan is that we are going to extend that because we are still in the middle of the pandemic and people will need to access that. And the last thing I think I wanted to share was that you may have seen the email from MSA, MSBA, the Maine School Management Association, Maine School Boards Association that came out recently. And there is a Zoom-style workshop on January 22nd from 8:30 to 12:30 on collective bargaining in a pandemic. So because of the pandemic, collective bargaining is likely to look different this year. And we have 2 groups coming up this spring when we'll be negotiating. So if anyone is interested in that, please let Martha Bilodeau know, and she will get you registered for that. And Betsy, that does it for me, I think.
Thank you. That's an awful lot to get caught up on. You'd almost think it was a while ago when we met last, but thank you. And obviously never a dull moment in the work. The work continues, holidays or not, so thank you for that. That brings us to public comment. Do we have any public wishing to comment? If not, I guess I just take this opportunity to thank folks for working, I think, very hard on ensuring that communication continues. This is not only an odd, different setting for our board meetings, but I'm sure for our families and our students, I mean, we're less apt to see people in passing, so I think it certainly takes a little bit more effort, and thanks to everyone for continuing those efforts. And just remind, it's always a great idea to go to the source if you have a question or a concern, and I'm optimistic that folks are doing that and continuing to keep those lines of communication open in what are still probably best described as challenging time. So thanks for that, and never a dull moment. Old business. It does not appear that we have any old business, so that would bring us to the consent agenda. We have a motion for the list.
So moved.
Carlos and Richard. All those in favor? Unanimous. Brings us to new business. Item 9.1, instructional nominees. Kim.
Thank you. Green Central School Committee is pleased to recommend Jeff Lewis for a one-year position as a grade 4 classroom teacher at Green Central School. Mr. Lewis has worked previously in some teaching positions, also as an interim technology director in RSU 5, as well as a substitute teacher in several schools. He also has experience as an independent technological project and security consultant, so he has a very rich background. Mr. Lewis earned his bachelor's degree in elementary education and psychology from the University of Maine, Farmington, and earned his master's degree in adult education and administration from USM. He holds a current Maine professional teaching certification, and his references cite his strong use of technology, ability to take initiative to do well for students, and the energy that he brings to his role as strengths. Mr. Lewis is looking forward to working in a new role and joining the Green Central School staff for the remainder of this school year.
Your motion?
Second.
Carlos and Richard. All those in favor? Unanimous. Brings us to item 9.2, approval of donation of $350 for Green Central School.
So moved. Second.
Carlos and Richard. Any discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.3, discussion of minimum wage increase and rates of pay for professional staff substitutes. And this is an item that Kim had distributed a bit of detail on for us. Further discussion, either Kim or Michelle on this one?
Did you want me to speak to that?
Sure.
So the only change that on that was to the substitute ed tax, and the problem, well, not the problem, the thing that we need to work on is that by increasing the minimum wage for the ed tax, it brings them within $2 of per day of what the substitute teachers are making. So we need to spend some time and look at that and see if we would like to make a proposal to change that.
How big a change was that from where we were at?
Well, it would have been 15 cents times 7 hours, so $1.15. $1.05, right? So they would have been $3 apart.
So that,
Yeah, it's
as you
87
said,
and 80.
that's something that you'll mull over and see what impact that may. Do we have any sense of what other area districts have?
I don't have numbers, but I've heard discussion. And I think during the situation, I think those rates have really gone up in some area districts. I don't have hard facts, so I want to take some time and gather that. Stay tuned.
So, I would just add in that superintendents have been discussing some rates of pay, so I've been collecting information on that as well, so I know exactly what is current in several of our districts. So we will have some good data.
So there's no action required tonight because the only change was to make sure that we're in compliance with the law.
That's right.
Thank you. Item 9.4, deletion of revised policy KB, parent involvement in education.
So moved. Second.
Carlos and Richard, discussion on this one? It sounds a little ominous that we're deleting a policy that describes itself as parent involvement in education. It's not required by law though,
No.
or recommended, or,
Does anybody on the committee, because we talked about this at length, does anybody want to?
If I remember correctly, it felt more like this is what we would really, really hope that all parents were doing, but there's no way to say that I, the parent, am doing all these things, or Carlos, or any of us. So if it's not warranted, we can't hold anybody to it. No need to have it.
I think
Remembering
you got
months
it.
ago?
Yes,
Okay.
I'm starting to remember as you talk.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
It was really not enforceable, as Crystal said, and it's very philosophical. We all agree with it, but we didn't, it's not needed, and so it's a piece of paper, basically, with words on it.
Other discussion on this one? All those in favor? Unanimous. 9.5, first and second reading and adoption of revised policy KI, visitors to the schools.
So moved. Second.
Carlos and Richard, discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous. Item 9.6, discussion of budget validation referendum date for FY21. Michelle, do you want to take this one, or Kim?
Yes, so as I said just a little while back, I had shared that 2 of our towns would like us to have the BVR held on the May 20th date that we have in our calendar, that we propose in our calendar, that goes along with what we've done in the past few years anyway. And one of our towns would prefer that we do the BVR on the same day as the state election, which is June 8th. So about 2.5 or so weeks later, I think it is. So the board had asked me to gather some more information, which Michelle actually helped me gather the information, on the number of voters over the past few years for the budget validation referendum, as well as what the district paid to hold that election. Also, just to note that the election last summer on July 14th was not a budget validation referendum, it was simply a budget referendum. Because we had to go remotely, if you remember that, we did a budget hearing instead of a budget vote. Okay. And so there's the data.
So we as a board need to select a date, correct?
Yes, Betsy, I guess I would maybe take a few minutes to talk about what, from the administration point, the difference of those 2 dates, a May 20th versus a June 8th date. So it's 2.5 weeks or so. That time of year is pretty critical because the summer winter was so short. Until we have our budget approved, we can't move forward with hiring. We can't move forward with summer projects. And so that time is pretty critical. Michelle, would you add to that?
Sure. First, I wanted to say that we did check with legal to see if they could hold it on a separate date, and it is illegal to do that. So they all have to be on the same date. We're hoping that maybe we could make some sort of consolation. So the problem that we have by making our vote that late is that the minute that our budget is approved, Dan starts working with his contractors to get them lined up for the summer, because that's such a short window of opportunity, and the contractors book up very quickly. So the minute that is, so that cuts into that timeline. The other problem that we had this past year by having it after June 30 is that anybody that is an hourly employee can't see an increase in their pay until it is finalized, which in theory is fine because they get their money, but it creates a lot more work for payroll because they have to go back and do back pay for those. The other thing that happens the minute the budget is approved is that the school secretaries start ordering for the following year. They can put in a date of they actually use 7/1, and because they don't work past mid-June, most of them, but they try to get their orders like together so that they're ready for when school starts in the fall. The other problem is that it delays me getting the warrants out to the towns. It takes the towns some time to change the dollar amounts that they need to pay us. And I know
this year was really late because of the pandemic, but it cut it really, really close for them getting that first July payment to us. And if I remember correctly, I believe one of them actually was a couple of days late, so it actually ended up being in August before that first payment came in. Those are the things from my perspective that any sort of delay, and of course this year we had all this crazy stuff anyway, but anytime we don't have to do that, it would be good.
Actually, Michelle, can you maybe explain a little bit further? We have a column that talks about costs to the district. Are those charges that each of the towns had sent back to us for?
They sent us a bill.
Okay.
For each of those. And I don't have it in front of me, I gave it to Kim a while ago, but it seemed as though there was 1 year, and I'm not sure what year it was, that
There was something different that happened because all of the towns billed us. But it seemed sporadic for the most part. Leeds never did. Turner has 2 out of 4, and then Green has all 4.
Do we have a sense, or is there an indication that if we piggyback this with when other voting is going on, that there would be a reduction in the cost?
I haven't asked the question. I haven't asked that question. I was gonna say, I can say that for this year, that the cost was almost double in each location. And that was due to the extra staff needed and the extended, because of the pandemic. And I believe they had extended hours too for all of the employees that were working there.
Yeah, maybe, and I'm sure somebody else remembers more accurately than I do. Instead of the usual process that looks like, do you vote yes, no, is it too high, is it too low? There was a bit more to the ballot itself this year because it was everything
This
all at
past
once.
year, there was, in July 14th, 20, yes, there was a lot more to it. There were many separate questions on that one.
Right, so my understanding is that certainly the feedback from the folks at the Turner Town office and perhaps Leeds as well was that that was not a very efficient, if not able to be efficiently processed, perhaps is one way.
Yes, what Kurt Schaub had, when I talked to Kurt Schaub about it, because I called all 3 towns to talk to them about the BVR date. What Kurt said, and in Leeds, Joyce shared the same thing, that it was pretty efficient to do it in May, and easily, when you add it to a state election, it is a lot more labor intensive. That was their feeling about it.
So currently our meeting schedule indicates that our budget validation referendum would be May 20th. Since we had voted on that meeting schedule at an earlier meeting, we would need to take action this evening if the board wished to go with a different date. Does that seem accurate? Do we have a motion to move to a different date for validation referendum? If not, we would stick with the date that we had voted on previously, the budget validation referendum, and I certainly would thank both Kim and Michelle for your legwork on this. I know that we talk about this nearly every year, that we would love to see more than 159 people voting on a 26-point-whatever million dollar budget, and we're always want to make sure that we are open to different ways of improving voter turnout for that. So I certainly hope that we can keep the lines of communication open with the towns and anyone. If somebody has a great idea to improve voter turnout, so certainly be open to it. but recognizing that we have some timeframes that are unique to the schools, certainly sounds like May 20th makes lots of sense. So thank you for all of your work on that. That brings us to 9.7, approval of October and November operating and expenditure reports.
So moved. Second.
That sounds like Carlos and Richard. Discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor? Unanimous? Our only remaining item for business is an executive session, unless we have anything else that we need to take up this evening. Kim?
So, Doc, thank you for the reminder. I almost forgot something very important, and that is that we wanted to say congratulations to Jen Bassett, third grade teacher at Green Central School, for this year's Patience Norman Award. So congratulations, Jen. We did put that out already, but it's a big deal, and she's thrilled.
Thanks for the reminder on that, and thanks again for Kim for sending a Zoom link out so we were able to kind of check that out, and definitely that's the response from Ms. Bassett was definitely a high point in a year that has been kind of not overly generous with high points. So that was a nice way to kind of slide into the end of 2020. So thanks again for making that possible. Anything else we need to take up for business this evening? If not, I would entertain a motion for 9.10, and that is a request for an executive session to discuss the superintendent of schools evaluation pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056D.
Second.
Carlos and Richard. All those in favor?